The minnow would be lost. The ship set ground on the shore of this uncharted desert isle with Gilligan, a millionaire, and his wife, the professor and Marianne, here on Gilligan's Isle.
You're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of Twilight Zone reviews. A journey into a wondrous land of intoxication where a father, son, and guest drink and retell episodes of the Twilight Zone.
There is a fifth dimension.
Stay tuned because your next stop is the Highlight Zone After Hours.
The Twilight Zone.
What's up, everybody? How are you? This is Steve.
This is Kelly.
Your two hosts today of the Highlight Zone After Hours. And what we're doing today is we're doing just an intimate one-on-one with two episodes because we're trying to get the next episodes lined up perfectly. And we haven't done one with just you and me in a while.
No, it's good.
We're doing our thing on a Saturday morning. We have Long Island's made fresh by yours truly. How's it going, buddy?
Goes good at 8:15. Nothing better than a Diet Coke with 4 distilled ingredients.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the Diet Coke is this much of how you make these. Well, everybody, it's good to see you again. We're going to be doing these on video from now on, so if you are on Spotify and you subscribe to us, you can see what we're doing right now. We just did one with Anthony Helmer, which was a blast.
Fantastic.
He keeps on asking for more episodes. He now loves the idea of watching the obscure ones, which I think is really cool. So he wants to go and watch more of these ones. So we'll get Anthony back on again, but go back and watch that. The next scheduled episodes we have cover The Invaders, which is the one that we've been hyping up now for quite some time. But Dad, let's get into today's episode because we're going to be covering 2 today. And the 2 that we're covering are Back There. And then what's yours called?
I am doing The Whole Truth.
The Whole Truth.
And nothing but the truth.
I'm going to insert some audio and video clips into this later because of what I just showed you over there, because there are some very striking similarities between your episode and future films. And once again, you have to give the mad props to the freaking Rod.
He was a trailblazer. In every episode from 1960 to today, you can find multiple shows that take from his premise, as bizarre as they were at the time. Now you see it over and over again in different
It's unavoidable.
genres.
It's just such a palpable part. And like what Anthony said, it's such a big part of pop culture that it's hard to like ignore.
Right.
Because it's been around for forever. But holy crap, we'll get to yours in a second.
What's interesting is people remember it from a long ago, but how many people have we had on as guest hosts that have never watched an episode of the Highlight Zone? Or the Twilight Zone.
That's my favorite thing. By the way, go back and listen to the Anthony one. I call the Twilight Zone the Highlight Zone every single time. But,
sorry, Rod.
Yeah, sorry, Rod.
Wherever
Don't worry.
you are.
We're a slightly step back from you. But anyway, that's my favorite part is seeing people's different relationship with the show. Either I asked a lady at work and she said no because she was always scared of the Twilight Zone. I told you that.
Every person we've talked to, Steve, says the same thing.
Yep.
As if the Twilight Zone was a series about scary things. I never found them really scary. I just found them creative, pushing the limit. I loved space. We talked about astronauts, things like that.
Right.
But not scary in the sense that we relate today to a horror movie or something like that.
Well said. There's a difference between slasher and thriller today than what this would be. I think that most of what makes this show scary back in the 60s was the hypotheticals. So like back then it was robots in space. Let's just go back to our favorite episode, which is Monsters That Do on Maple Street. That was not a scary episode, but it's scary today because you know that shit could actually happen.
Right.
But it's not like... The fact that we keep on getting people saying that it's scary, I'm like, oh, that's so interesting that it had this stigma of horror. And it's really not. By the way, if you look it up on IMDb, the titles, or not the titles, but the genre of the show has recently changed. And I consider it because of our show. They added this. So dark fantasy, supernatural horror, drama, fantasy, horror, mystery, and sci-fi. But they recently just added dystopian sci-fi. So if you look up here, this is how they classify it. That was not there when we started recording this show. So it does show that people still are watching the show and they're updating it. Because a lot of them are dystopian, end of the world, what the hell happens if this happens.
Apocalyptic events,
exactly.
but not horrific, not horror in the sense. I mean, everyone that we have on here, and it's a small sampling, but they equate it to I don't like scary.
Yeah.
And scary is a genre of events that they're relating to current day movies. Having never seen this, they then jump ahead to what today is a scary movie, and this never was that.
No, it's not even close. It's a completely different thing. So I that's why I find the interaction with these people fascinating.
And at the end of every episode, when we have a guest host, they always come around to where we've always been.
Absolutely.
It's like this is something much more than a hyped up scary series.
Well, let's take Mark, for example, Mark Abramson, which was one of my favorite interviews that we had done because it was so off the rails and goofy, but he said that he always avoided it because it was scary. Yeah. So we asked him if he would come back, and he goes, absolutely, give me more episodes. Literally last night I spoke with Anthony, and Anthony literally told me, dude, just assign me some more. He said assign me some more. Like he wanted some more obscure episodes to watch. Exactly. I love this. So anyway, it's good that we're all getting together. But to get on to the point, we're only covering 2 episodes today. And my episode is called Back There. And I'll be doing the retelling of this one. I've had a margarita and then half of this right now. And that's the best way to start a Saturday morning, just because that means that the rest of my day is going to be absolute shite.
And we are going to be together for this whole day with our families.
Exactly. And I will be asleep or groggy or whatever at 1, and I'm going to regret it. But, for the sake of the show.
I will gauge and report on the downfall of this.
Oh my God! Yeah,
this day today for.
So anyway, let's just go right into it. We have 2 episodes to review for you. Am I saying that right? It is kicking in. Back There aired January 13th, 1961. Was directed by David Orrick McDiernan and written by Rod himself. So this was one, and while I find my stuff, that I had seen multiple times before, but never really cared for. So this was one that I started, I'm like, okay, I know this one. And so here we go, the opening narration. Witness a theoretical argument, Washington, D.C., the present. 4 intelligent men talking about an improbable thing like going back in time. A friendly debate revolving around a simple issue. Could a human being change what has happened before? Interesting and theoretical because whoever had heard of a man going back in time? Before tonight, that is, because this is the Twilight Zone. All right, so this is a pretty basic premise. I actually think it's pretty simple. There's a guy, and his name is Pete, right? He's played by Russell Johnson, Pete Corrigan.
I just call him the professor.
The professor. Okay, so he's a younger guy in a group of people at this very elite.
It's a gentleman's club, and these are old codgers mostly. Sipping their whiskeys and smoking their cigars and telling lies to each other.
Honestly, the camera angle goes so far to show them all doing that. It's kind of hilarious. So let's see if that oh, there we go. That fixed it. Okay, so the camera goes through, and they're all kind of telling stories. They're playing bridge or poker or whatever they're playing, and they start talking about time travel, right? Is that how it comes up?
Yeah.
The conversation? And so
they talk about how you could change time to make money in... Because they bring up the 29 crash of Wall Street.
Yes. So they're playing with this conversation, and the younger guy in the group, Pete, he is finally done, and he leaves the room. This is all before the opening narration, by the way. And he starts walking out, and this one I don't know if I appreciated it or if it's just one of those things. I'm so used to them doing bizarre, cool cinematics. He leaves this gentleman's club, and I turned this up too loud. He leaves this gentleman's club, and he starts getting like woozy, and the camera kind of only does like a fade, which is, I thought, a little bit lackluster. I was like, okay, what just happened? I was very curious because it seemed so minimal. He walks out, and the camera kind of got fuzzy, and he kind of just was like, where am I? And then nothing changes. It just goes right to him.
I apologize for interrupting, but real quick, an event
Did you just apologize for interrupting? I interrupt everything. There's no apology needed on this show.
I do apologize for interrupting, but then I'm going to do it anyway.
That means I need to increase my manners.
That's my allowance to then interrupt.
Okay, go ahead.
Without feeling guilty for it. He has that interaction with the waiter who spills the drink on
Okay,
him.
I got.
And it plays a major role in the very end because that guy, his name is brought up again. But
Yep, okay,
because
thank you.
it was so vague, and when he suddenly went back in time, just like you said, I was trying to figure out, did it have anything to do with that drink being spilled on him, which doesn't make any sense because he didn't hit his head or anything.
Yeah, I genuinely did forget to bring up a very crucial part. While he's walking out, he goes over to one of the people that's like a coat check person.
So I don't apologize for interrupting.
Don't. You fixed it. That's what I'm saying. This is what happens. You drink and you forget what major plot points. So he gets a drink spilled on him. Kind of, it reminded me of The Shining. You know, the guy, what's his name? I forget.
It's exactly like the head waiter in the old, back in the 29.
Yes, and he's kind of, and so he's wiping off his jacket. And then he leaves outside and then he gets fuzzy. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. So he comes back, and all of a sudden he realizes, I'm skipping a bunch here, but he realizes that he is currently at the same place, but however many years earlier, literally the night that Abraham Lincoln gets shot at Ford's Theater. So he now realizes, wait a minute, what is going on? You know, where am I? And he starts to put the pieces together, and he is a history buff, so he does understand, and he gets most of the timeline, which is kind of crucial because later he's like, well, there's time. Yeah. So anyway, he starts to alert people that, hey, we're going to see what play tonight? You're going to go see our American cousin? And the president is going to be there? Oh my God, this is the night. This is the night that Lincoln gets shot. And John Wilkes Booth is the one that shoots him. So he starts telling everybody. And he starts being very loud about it. And he's like, you got to go. You got to go. So everyone thinks he's nuts. And they start not believing him. And then you start to get cracks in the system where some people start to buy into what he's doing, including this one. What's his name? Do you remember his name? The guy? One guy starts to buy into his thing.
It's the guy that I thought was Steve McQueen.
Okay, I can see what you mean. Yeah.
And he's a cop, but they end up arresting him or taking him to the police station because they think he's drunk. So they're going to throw him in the drunk tank. And he keeps ranting about, no, you've got to stop this because our president's going to get shot. Lincoln's going to get shot. And the only one who believes him is that beat cop who's in the police station and goes to the desk sergeant and says, wait a minute, why don't we think about this? Maybe there's some truth to that. And then what happens? The desk sergeant blows him off.
Yes, and it comes to fruition the way that we know it does. And it goes from, you have to fill in my blanks here, because from that scene, do they keep him in custody? No, he goes, no. The cop says, I'm going to take him home. The guy that kind of believes him goes, I'm going to take him home. And he walks in and he goes, who's that guy?
He says, I'm a doctor.
I'm a doctor.
I can fix this. You don't have to arrest him. We don't want to make a big deal. I can treat him if you'll put him into my custody.
Right. He's going to take him into his custody out of the willingness of his heart. And the sheriff or the cop, whoever the hell he is just like, that's awful noble of you, sir. Take him. That's great. So he releases him into the custody of some random guy. By the way, I am super pumped that we have changed our standards on releasing prisoners. That is wild. I mean, he wasn't really a prisoner. It was more of a drunk tank situation where he was, trying to cool off. But they just let him go.
Except on the border. We sort of let them all go.
Okay, keep it down.
I'm sorry.
And so they release him into their custody, and the guy just leaves with him. So then keep going, because now I've butchered my delivery.
So this guy who pretended to be a doctor, and the desk sergeant put our star, who is the professor on Gilligan's Island, this is the only way I'll remember it.
See the post credits. We have a bloopers reel. I'm going to hopefully keep it in there. Go ahead.
So he takes him back to his apartment, and our guy's still raiding on, and he says, hey, we need to get you just to calm down. I want to treat you, and let's see if we can't get through this. And he gives him a drink. And the drink is a drug drink.
Oh, yes.
So our guy passes out.
Yes. So the guy that's now back in time is passed out from this. You can keep going. You're doing a better job than I am.
So the professor passes out, and he wakes up a few minutes later, and he tries to get to his feet, crawls to the door, passes out again. So a time span passes. He wakes up because people are pounding on the door of the apartment. And it's the lady of the house, who at first he thought was his house, and she didn't let him in.
Right.
But then she opens the door, and who comes in? The cop that believed him in the police station. And that cop says, tell me what's going to happen. And right at that point, they hear people out on the street from the window of their apartment shouting, "The president's been shot. The president's been shot."
Yeah, and so now you get the point of the entire thing is he was right, and the one dude, I don't really understand that role, by the way.
See, this is the weird thing about this episode is this friendly cop plays a major role, as you're going to elaborate on the very end of this, how it wraps up.
You just
as it changes history. At that point, they're in the apartment or in Booth's room, but Booth, of course, had left and had killed the president. And suddenly he goes back to modern day, and he's outside the door of the Potomac Club, and he walks inside,
Good
sees
name,
the other
the
guys,
Potomac Club.
the
Good job.
Potomac Club, and he says, "You guys were talking about going back in time. No, we've moved on that. We're talking about something else now." And he tries to interject and bring it back, and they don't want to pay any attention to him. So he then brings up at the very end, he says, "But you can go back in time. By the way, do you remember we have a waiter here by the name of blah, blah, blah?" It was the waiter that spilled the drink
on him in the first place.
And that waiter at that point doesn't exist. However, there's one of the four guys at the table, a very wealthy dude, because these are all wealthy people, says, the best way to get wealth is to inherit it, which is so critical.
By the way, I hated that. When they were talking about
Yeah.
that, and they were just like, my favorite way of inheriting wealth is to just get it from your parents or whatever. I hated that.
Yeah, it's cringeworthy.
It is.
In every aspect. But that guy then tells his story how his grandfather had witnessed a person who predicted Lincoln's death, but history never recorded it. But because of that experience with this guy, and then Lincoln did get shot that night, he changed his life. He made a big deal about how he had supported him. He then got into politics. He then became a wealthy landowner. And the end of the story is he was the grandfather of the old fart that was sitting at the table.
It wasn't he the sheriff, the guy that helped him was the cop back in Lincoln times. He ended
the
up
cop's grandson.
Okay, but what they said I thought was interesting because he was so adamant about trying to save the president. He ran for office, became an official, and was some sort of a politician. And this person
and then got into an investment
thing. And so this dude talking today is literally talking about that night. It started that night. So this dude's wealth began with our guy's time travel predicting Lincoln's death.
And he does say, but history never recorded it. I just remember the stories about my grandfather, and he had this dude tell him that he predicted Lincoln's shooting, but no one believed him.
Yeah.
So it brings it around, but it was sort of hard. It was a rough tie-in.
I think that the tie-in was super rough, but I enjoyed the tie-in. I love the idea that this one rich son of a bitch who's over here flaunting his wealth actually got it because of the time travel.
Yeah.
That I found to be absolutely fascinating.
Which
and
is
fantastic.
what the professor from Gilligan's Island is screaming to them that they need to
Absolutely.
believe that it
Yes.
happens. And the guy himself, who is the personification of wealth because of going back in time, just sort of blows him off. And at the end, you just realize, who knows? You and I could have gone back in time, and the result of that was we're here right now broadcasting.
That's a very good point and a nice way to bring it around. So the closing narration is Mr. Peter Corrigan lately returned from a place back there, a journey into time with highly questionable results, proving on one hand that the threads of history are woven tightly, and the skein, S-K-E-I-N, skein? What is that word?
I have no idea.
Dude,
right now, 'cause
Rod
I'm
made
halfway
these.
through my drink. So
I know, me too.
it sounds
Rod
good.
Serling wrote these so artistically that sometimes I don't know what the hell he's saying. The skein of events cannot be undone, but on the other hand, there are small fragments of the tapestry that can be altered. Tonight's thesis to be taken as you will in the Twilight Zone. Okay, so I enjoyed this episode. It has a 7.5 on IMDb, which is if you're following our show and if you look these up, on the higher side. 7.5 is a solid B. I gave it a 6. Not in a hater way. By the way, 6 is still better than most stuff I watch on TV or in the theaters today at all. So that's pretty good. But I thought that it was kind of a jonky way of telling a time travel, save the president kind of story. I did like the twist of his counterpart, I guess you could call it a counterpart, his friend, not a counterpart, his associate,
grandfather,
his whatever was related to his
Yes.
thing. And I like that twist factor, because the twist isn't that he went back in time. The twist is that he went back in time and that it did work and mattered.
But the
it
twist
didn't.
isn't clear. You're still wondering what are they talking about?
Yeah, exactly. And what caused that rift in time? Most of the other time travel episodes have a very palatable. You walk through a portal, a beam of
obvious-
light. You wished something. Someone enchanted you into whatever. This was just literally a drink getting spilled on him, and then a dizzying camera moment, and then he was gone. So that's why I wasn't super fond of the episode on a critical rewatch, just because I was like, I don't really understand what caused this. Now, I understand that in 22 minutes, you can't deliver every freaking thing that I want. But the catalyst of the episode is, how the hell did this guy end up back in,
Right.
Lincoln
There's
times?
no event that created
Right.
his being going back in time. He didn't get hit on the head. He didn't have a
He-
lightning bolt come
He
down.
got a drink spilled on him by a questionable, at best.
And then he had a buzz on. He goes outside and
Yeah,
suddenly he's back
the
in
whole
time.
thing. He could be recording a show with us. I mean, if he
Yes.
had 2 of your Long Islands, he might be dreaming this shit on his own. So, overall thoughts, what was your rating?
I gave it between a 7 and an 8 for all
Okay.
the reasons that you mentioned. I'll give it a 7, which is a solid B. I loved how, and again, the cinematography, and I'll just mention this real quick and then we'll move on. When he goes back, he's standing outside the Potomac Club, frustrated because the other guys aren't following him on time travel. And it goes from the street lamps are electric to all
a
of a
gas
sudden
lamp.
the same
Okay.
street lamp turns into a gas lamp. And then it pans out, black and white, of course, and it shows the side street where cars were driving through. All of a sudden, they're horse-drawn carriages. I thought that was so cool because it was the exact same set, but you showed it going back in time. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I didn't quite give credit for that. The reflection of time travel was done so eloquently that it was in one lamp. One was an electric street lamp,
Yes.
and then it slowly transformed into a gas lamp, which is crucial. And I didn't mean to
just
skim
find
over it.
No, but
I
it's one
like
of those
that-
things you look back and you say, this is Rod Serling doing his thing.
Yeah, absolutely. With a low budget, trying to find a cool way of doing it. It reminds me
Yeah.
of young Spielberg trying to find a way to put bullets in the ground, and you put rocks in a thing you step on. It's genius work. There's only one bit of trivia that I want to relay to everybody here, and it's after Execution, which is one of the ones that you had a very hyperbole opinion on, which is the one with the guy that was being hung and then he went back in time. This is the second episode of the Twilight Zone involving time travel in which Russell Johnson, the main guy, was the star.
Yeah.
Because he was the one trying to put the science together about getting that guy back,
Exactly.
and then it ended up him taking his body, and then he ended up hanging at the end. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting time travel one. 2 episodes he was in were time travel episodes.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's interesting.
Yeah. So anyway,
Very cool.
all right. So moving along, we have The Whole Truth.
Go
Now-
ahead and read the intro because I don't have it, but
All right. So
I'm going to smile throughout this on the camera. I love this episode
Okay.
for so many reasons.
Okay, The Whole Truth was aired on January 20th, 1961. Okay, and this was directed by James Sheldon and written by the one and only Rod Serling. So the opening narration is, this, as the banner already is proclaimed, is Mr. Harvey Hunett. Hunnicutt? Hunnicutt, an expert on commerce and con jobs, a brash, bright, and larcenily loaded wheeler and dealer who, when the good Lord passes out a conscience, must have gone for a beer and missed out. That line literally made me laugh watching the show. Like, he went for a beer and missed out on a conscience. I was like, what is this episode about? But okay, I'll keep going. And these are a couple of other characters in our story. A little old man in a model car, but not just any old man and not just any Model A. There's something very special about both of them. As a matter of fact, in just a few moments, they'll give Harvey Hunnicutt something he's never experienced before. Through the good offices and a little magic, they will unload on Mr. Hunnicutt the absolute necessity to tell the truth. Exactly where his conjecture, but also to where they're heading for. This we know because all of them, and you know this, are on the threshold of the Twilight Zone. There you go.
Think stereotypes in life. Everyone pictures, when you mention something, they picture what that image is because it's a stereotype of something that has been broadcast forever. So this is used car lot salesman. We all have a stereotype of what a used car lot salesman is.
Yeah.
This guy, it shows the camera from across the street panning in on a used car lot, and it focuses in on the logo, the name of the used car lot, and it says, "Get a honey from Honeycut." I thought that was
Honeycut. That's how you say it.
Honeycut. Get a honey from Honeycut. So it starts out with this young couple looking for cars, and he approaches them and he puts on his best spiel, and they say, "Yeah, we're looking to spend $500 on a newer car." And he starts talking them out of newer cars. Now, you don't want a newer car. A newer car it's mass produced. There's no quality in it. You need to look at some older cars where quality was important, where individual strength and every car was important.
He's being as much of a hardcore used car salesman as any stereotype that you could even possibly imagine.
So he talks him out of this newer car because he doesn't have any newer cars on his lots. These are all pieces of shit. He brings them to a car that is just a total dog. He opens the door. "You got to sit in this. Come on." And then he walks the wife around. "And you sit in this." So while they're trying to feel like this is a car for them, which in reality, it's a literal piece of dog shit.
Yeah.
This car.
He explains it later.
So an old a guy drives up in a Model A. And this old man climbs out. So, of course, our salesman is distracted. These people are in the car now. So he's looking at this car, and he approaches this old guy. And they start bantering about this old car. And he's giving the old guy a hard time. "Oh, this thing is a relic. You know, could probably get more if you sold it to the Smithsonian, blah, blah, blah." And so he offers the guy $25. And the guy thinks about it for a minute. And he says, I think I'll take this. But I have to tell you, the car is haunted. "Well, what do you mean it's haunted?" "Oh, you know things. It's just a haunted car." And he says, "Well, go in the office, sign the paperwork, sign over the title, and I'll be in there and we'll take care of this." By the way, he gives him $25 up front. I love that.
Yeah, he does.
He pays him before he shakes his hand and they agree to sell it. So he's forcing the money on the guy, and the guy is going, "Okay, I'll take the $25. And you learn at the end why he doesn't argue with that. So the guy's in there signing the paperwork and gets the receipt, and he says, "By the way, this car is haunted, and you have to tell the truth. The owner of the car has to tell the truth." So he's blowing him off. The car salesman is just thinking, this is just a shtick.
This is garbage.
Yeah,
right.
This is garbage. So what happens is he then goes through a series of sales events. He cannot tell a lie. This guy, people walk into the lot, and he says, "You don't want that. It's a piece of junk." Honestly, go down the street to a reputable dealer.
He does, yeah.
Because you don't want to buy a car from me. He actually walks around a car and the bumper falls off. He's selling things that would not run.
He literally, his shin bumps into it and the bumper falls off. And it leads to the cheesiest music in like Twilight Zone history. It's like, wop, wop, wah, that cute kind of shit. And so the car's falling apart. He literally just bumped it.
So one of the guys that comes in, so he's in the midst of this turmoil of having to tell the truth, and he knows he can't lie. A dude walks in, it's a politician, and he's looking at the old Model A, and he says, "Yeah, I want a car, that my voters will think I'm reliable, I'm trustworthy, I'm down to earth." And he starts saying, "Well, I got to tell you, this car is haunted." And the politician questions him, "What do you mean it's haunted?" "Yes, the owner of this car cannot tell a lie." And this potential buyer says, "Well, I'm a politician. I cannot tell the truth. It's against my nature." So he leaves. He had a sale, but the guy says, "I cannot tell the truth, so I'm going to leave and go somewhere else." So
yeah, he actually bought that. Okay, so I also found that to be super weird, by the way, that this one person believed that. He bought it.
Yeah. Oh, he bought it 100%. But politicians, they're not going to take the risk. No. Even though it makes no sense, why take the risk? Because your whole life and career is based on lying.
Not all politicians will do that, because here in 2 seconds, you're going to find out there's one that won't.
Right. But he buys it for a different reason.
Right.
Anyway, so the very last scene, a guy he almost looks like a chauffeur. A very petite guy in a black suit approaches our salesman on the lot. Oh, by the way, this guy's the owner. Honeycut's the owner. He has a salesman who's just as shisty as he is. Yeah. And during this episode, he Honeycutt's telling his salesman, I cannot tell a lie. You have to make new signs for the wind placards or the windshield signs saying that this is a lemon, this and that. And he ends up, the young guy, the sales guy, wants a raise. And the sales guy says, remember, I've been here 6 months. And Honeycutt says, I was lying to you. I'm never going to give you a raise. There's no way you're going to get more money from me. And this small little munchkin of a dude punches our dude in the face.
He's literally like 5'6", and he just goes, well, I've got something for you. And the camera shifts behind Honeycutt, and he just like cold cocks him right in the face. It's wildly funny to see.
So back to the last scene. This small, well-dressed guy approaches our salesman in the lot, and they're looking at the Model A. And he says, yeah, this is the car. I think my boss would like to own that car. Well, I have to tell you that this car is haunted. But no, I don't care. But if I want this car, my boss, who's in this limousine sitting out there, this gigantic old Cadillac is just rumbling in the parking lot. And so Honeycutt says, well, the owner has to sign the document. He's telling the complete truth, even though he doesn't want to. And this small, diminutive chauffeur says, okay, give me the paperwork. He goes to the car window. The window rolls down. You see a hand reach out, take the paperwork, and sign it. Hands it back to the little guy. The little guy comes back. The deal is done. He says, I bought it for $25. I'll sell it for $25. And this little guy tells a little story that the owner wants a car that is reliable, that will project to his people that he's a man of the people. So you don't know who it is until the very end. What's interesting about this, and it's sort of another double twist, is even though this guy, and I'll give you his name in a second, those old timers like me will recognize the name.
Yeah, hold on. Just so you guys, in case you were watching this or you watch it now based on our review, until this exact moment that he's about to say, I didn't realize that this person was a real person. I just genuinely didn't. I'm just dummy. I don't know.
And you wouldn't. You weren't alive back then. I was just a little kid.
Right, but
then. This is 1961.
The point is they're relaying something very cool in the next 1 second that he's about to say, which raised my review 1 whole star rating because it was palatable and it was a real person at the time.
This is Rod Serling is controversial in that this guy has a code of ethics.
He didn't give a fuck.
No.
He wanted to tell exactly what was going on and realized that he had a buffer of sci-fi to protect him. This guy is an icon. And if you don't realize that until this moment, you should, because no one today, I'm telling you this right into the mic.
No one has the balls.
No one levels the playing field like what Rod Serling did. And at the time, Rod was very pro all of the things that he believed in, and he freaking let it known.
He was
Today
very
you can't,
patriotic.
or else you get canceled. He was patriotic, but also against bias. That was his big thing.
Religion frustrated him, but he let every opinion of his come out unvarnished. Just lay it out there. So this is 1960.
Go ahead.
So what was the biggest issue in politics in 1960? It was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes.
So the Cuban Missile Crisis was Fidel Castro, because it was a communist offshoot, they were being supported by the USSR, Russia. Who was the premier of Russia? Nikita Khrushchev at the time. Nikita Khrushchev, who is sitting in this limo in this used car lot, because this
isn't fake. This is what's in the show, by the way. He's literally in this car.
Takes the paperwork, goes to his office, and he's looking at the name and reads, it's Nikita Khrushchev. And he knows exactly who that is, because this is real time. This is Rod Serling in Politics of the Day.
This.
Headline Politics is now bringing the arch enemy of the free world into his show, The Twilight Zone, and making him look like a moron, an idiot, because the moral is this guy, without driving the car, is in a gigantic limousine, first of all. So he's the antithesis of the people's man. He's in a limo, a huge limo. You don't even
see his face.
You see his hand, an arm and a hand.
You see his hand from the side, which is a smart move. You don't want to put him on there, but he's all acting through a third party person, his butler his driver, his chauffeur. And when he tells him, he goes, no. I don't want the chauffeur to sign the title.
It has to be the owner.
It has to be the owner, which gives me the chills to a level I can't explain, go ahead.
So the very last scene, they drive off. there's obviously someone else in the limo because it drives off, and then the Model A puts behind the limo and leaves. Our guy, Honeycutt, in the last scene goes into the office, picks up the phone, and he obviously calls the FBI or the CIA or the White House, and he says, yeah, I need to speak to Jack Kennedy. It's really important. It involves Nikita Khrushchev, and then it goes, that's the end of the show. So he links it all in. He's enough of a patriot, Honeycutt is, that he goes, I just sold a car to the guy that is trying to put nukes in Cuba and destroy us. In real time, in the real world, when this episode was filmed, this was going on.
Okay, so I'm going to go right into the closing narration because it's super critical to what we're talking about right now. Narrator. Couldn't happen, you say? Far-fetched? Way out? Tilt out of center? Possible. But the next time you buy an automobile, if it happens to look as if it had just gone through the Battle of the Marne, and the seller is ready to throw in and bargain of his own terms, be particularly careful in this explaining of whose boss is about to be your grandmother's funeral when you are actually at Chavez Ravine watching the Dodgers. It'll be a fact that you are the proud possessor of an instrument of truth manufactured and distributed as the exclusive producer in the Twilight Zone. I love that one. Go ahead.
This was so pure black and white. This is Rod's patriotism, his personality, his belief system, everything that he felt strongly about. He injects into a show of his in real time, something that is on headline news. This is all that the news was talking about back then, and interjects it in such a way that is humorous. I found this to be not only humorous, because when he has to tell the truth, the situations with the people that he engages with are hilarious.
Agreed.
And at the end, when you know the history of what's going on back then, you realize how poignant, how strong. Serling is amazing. He's an absolute genius.
So I have a lot to say about this. I'm going to keep it super short.
Go for it. I've said my spiel. I loved it.
This got a 7 for me. It's a solid performance. Its IMDb rating, which is what we use here, is a 6.4. So I was slightly above the thing. What was your rating?
Because I'm of that generation, I gave it a 9. I absolutely loved that.
Yeah, okay.
But that's because it's me.
I wish that for only one day Dad couldn't tell a lie.
Was it good for you?
I've had better. No.
Any change, mister?
Absolutely.
Could you spare some?
Yes, I could.
I can't lie.
Okay. I've just inserted an audio clip to prove one of the things that we've said for the entire time of this show is that Rod Serling's creativity has impacted all of our futures in entertainment. Liar Liar is a movie with what's his name? I'm blanking right now on freaking Liar Liar. Oh my God, Jim Carrey. And the entire movie is based on the premise of you can't tell a lie. The fact that Liar Liar is a comedy remake of this episode is wild. I genuinely think that it should say in the credits of Liar Liar, co-written by Rod Serling, because no one had done a tale of you take this on, you can't lie until now. It was this episode, and then 50 years later when Jim Carrey made the movie. It was great. It was a great episode. A very good episode, and especially if you want to see things later, go look up the trivia. It literally says Liar Liar was based on this. But no one in Liar Liar attributes Rod Serling.
You wouldn't know that.
You would have no idea.
Except for this show with you and I, really.
Yeah, I mean, for real. I don't know. It bugs me because if you write a concept as original as you can't lie, and then you make a movie about it, it should say...
But then to throw Nikita Khrushchev into the storyline.
It's a great episode. So these two were fantastic. To go. Yep. I highly recommend to go rewatch. Listen to this episode and then go rewatch for yourselves. Thank you guys for watching. And Dad, thank you again.
Hey,
cheers.
This has been a blast.
Absolutely.
A shortened version, but we made it.
A shortened version, 2 episodes. Crucial to the telling of our overall story. Make sure you subscribe and like to all of our stuff. Share it.
Don't forget Paramount Plus.
By the way, I have noticed that he is the Paramount Plus guy. He says it in every episode. Hey, Look at me. Paramount Plus. Do you see me? This man right here deserves a free subscription.
Paramount
I'm not
Plus,
telling you.
If you're watching, please, you do a fantastic job. We love what you do.
Hey,
Thanks for
so-
broadcasting.
I've been Steve.
This is Kelly.
Thanks again for joining us on the Highlight Zone, and we will see you later in another dimension.
One doesn't.